One single dose of Lenmeldy, currently the world's most expensive drug, costs $4.25 million. For that price, you could buy the Learjet 60, a private jet that could take you coast to coast in a single afternoon. Or if you're a more practical person, you could just buy 134 brand new Toyota Camrys. All SE, so still luxury. But how? How can a pharmaceutical company charge $4.25 million for a single dose of a medicine that effectively saves a child's life? That's what this video will get into. Who decides $4.25 million? How much is this pharma company really making from setting that crazy price? And who ultimately is forced to pay it when a child needs it? Let's dive in. In 2024, the FDA approved Orchard Therapeutics drug called Lenmeldy in the UK, officially surpassing the previous leader, Hemgenix, as the world's most expensive drug by wholesale price. Now, Lenmeldy is a treatment for a rare genetic condition called metachromatic leukodystrophy. And before Lenmeldy, children with early onset MLD almost always face neurological decline and eventual death. And in treating this, Lenmeldy is shockingly effective. 100% of pre-symptomatic patients treated with Lenmeldy who had the late infantile form of MLD were alive at age 6, compared with just over half of the natural history group. Lenmeldy is a gene therapy, meaning doctors take a patient's own stem cells, they insert a working copy of the ARSA gene, and then inject those modified cells back into the blood so the body can start to produce the enzyme it's missing. But how did we get to $4.5 million for a single dose? Well, the company that makes Lenmeldy isn't sitting in a room calculating the cost of chemicals and labor and then adding a normal markup, how some people might think drug prices are set. Instead, drug prices for rare diseases follow something called orphan drug economics. In the United States, the healthcare system intentionally encourages companies to develop treatments for rare conditions. If pharmaceutical companies were forced to sell rare disease treatments at competitive prices, there'd be no real incentive for them to do the research and actually produce the medicine because there's not enough patients to treat for them to make huge profits. So regulators created protections for these pharma companies. One major protection is orphan drug market exclusivity. When a drug receives orphan designation and approval, it can receive 7 years of market exclusivity in the US, during which the FDA generally will not approve a competing drug for the same indication or the same disease. In addition, drugs can also benefit from patent protection, which typically lasts about 20 years from the time of a patent filing. And they also get tax credits and clinical trial subsidies for orphan drug research. So they're getting pretty good incentives. And these rules give pharma companies temporary monopoly-like pricing power so that they can actually create drugs that otherwise wouldn't exist. But the result is a major irony. Making drugs that treat millions of people is often economically more difficult, or maybe I should say less successful, than making drugs that treat a small number of patients. If a drug is meant for a large population, competitors will eventually enter the market. Generic versions will appear and then prices will fall. But if a drug is designed for an ultra-rare disease, the company may only have a few hundred potential customers in the entire country. I mean, the genetic disorder that Lenmeldy treats only affects about 40 children in the US per year. But pharmaceutical development costs don't scale down just because the patient population does. So pharma companies don't usually price a drug based off what it actually costs. The argument is that the price should reflect the economic value of the treatment. In other words, if a therapy can potentially replace decades of hospital care and ongoing treatment, the upfront price captures some portion of those avoided future costs. Critics argue that this allows pharma to set egregious and arbitrary prices for drugs. Pharma, on the other hand, argues that it's the only way to make rare disease research financially sustainable. Either way, the final price ends up being less about production costs and more about the combination of biology, economics, and whatever the healthcare market is willing to tolerate. And the next question people usually ask is, how much money are these pharma companies making off the backs of children with these horrific genetic conditions? Pharmaceutical companies typically don't publish detailed profit data, but we do have some insight from the period when Lenmeldy's developer, Orchard Therapeutics, was still publicly traded before being acquired by another company, Kowa Kirin, in 2014. And their numbers were surprisingly small compared to the price. Orchard reported about 18.8 million in product sales from Lenmeldy in the US in 2022, the therapy's first full commercial year. Early 2023 filings suggest roughly 12.7 million in net revenue through the first 9 months. Independent analysts estimated peak global sales could eventually reach about 300 million over multiple years, though this is only a projection. The strange part is, even at $4.25 million per treatment, Lenmeldy didn't immediately become a profit machine. Before they sold, Orchard remained unprofitable as a standalone company. In 2022, the company reported a net loss of approximately $150.7 million, And part of the reason is manufacturing. Production is closer to biological engineering than mass drug manufacturing. Each dose requires specialized processing, strict storage conditions, and complex transport logistics, which keeps total treatment volume low. So, despite the shocking headline price, the economic reality is that revenue is constrained less by pricing power and more by the biological difficulty of scaling the therapy itself. So, who does end up paying that shocking headline price of $4.25 million? When a drug like Lenmeldy costs $4.25 million, you probably imagine somebody getting a massive bill in the mail. And that's actually almost never how it usually works. In the US, these treatments that are this expensive are rarely paid for by a single person. They're usually paid for by someone's work. Most Americans under 65, 154 million of them actually, get insurance from their work. But there's a good chance you're in the 67% of people whose work isn't buying insurance the way most people think. Instead, they often pay medical bills, also called claims, directly and use third-party administrators to manage the system. It's called self-insurance. In most cases, companies save money by not working with insurance companies in a more traditional sense and by paying their own bills. But if one of the children of their employees needs Lenmeldy, it'd be considered catastrophic medical spending. For cases like this and others like Hemgenix or Kebilidi, these companies buy something called stop-loss insurance. It is cheaper than traditional insurance and it's designed to help the company stop or cap the potential catastrophic losses if one employee has an extremely expensive medical event, like needing Lenmeldy. The company pays medical costs up to a certain threshold, and then after that, the stop-loss company takes over and pays the remaining amount. What this does in practice is spread the risk across a large group of people and organizations so that it doesn't just fall on that one organization who has a Lenmeldy case. So that's who pays. But with extremely high-priced drugs like Lenmeldy, we're entering a strange new era for medicine, into the era of biological engineering, where the medicine is a miracle, but the business model is an absolute nightmare. But if there's more cures out there to be found like Lenmeldy, you can guarantee that the race to find the most expensive drug isn't going to be slowing down anytime soon. If you found this video interesting and you'd like to see more like it in the future, please consider subscribing for more. This is Tyler Dutchover. Thanks for watching.